there's this gigantic blanket of shame that we can't even free ourselves from in order to see our lives clearly enough to make better choices.
All right. In this video, we're going to talk about one of the heaviest issues for humans, guilt and shame. Now, they're connected to each other and they're similar, but they are different. And you got to understand the distinctions if you're going to get over them yourself or help your clients get over them. These are two of the nastiest human conditions. They're like just weights that so many people are carrying around in their lives. And a lot of our sabotaging patterns are connected to the guilt and the shame that we haven't let go of. We're also going to talk about resentment, which is related to both of these two issues. So if you're a coach and you want to get over one of the biggest emotional anchors that's probably holding you back from more success in your business, or you want to help your clients get over one of those emotional anchors is probably holding them back from happiness in their life, watch this whole thing.
Guilt and shame are vicious emotions to try to live with. They're so heavy. And I'm going to throw resentment in here and apply it to other people as well. These are my definitions of guilt, shame, and resentment, the distinctions. And if you have different distinctions, that's fine. But just for the sake of this argument or this conversation, I'm going to use resentment as we apply it to other people. There is some self-resentment, but I'm going to use it in being applied to other people. We resent other people for doing things, for not doing things, for things that they did in the past. Guilt is when we're holding ourselves in contempt, essentially, for making the wrong decision from the past. We feel guilty that we weren't there for a big life event. I have a lot of clients that feel guilty because they weren't there when their parents passed away. Or people feel guilty for the decisions that they made in the past when they were young or whatever. And then shame is the emotional punishment that we use with ourselves. Shame can be at least attempted to be applied to other people, but I'm going to use it here as the shame that we put on ourselves. And we hear the wording all the time, shame on you. And a lot of times we hear that from parents to children, which is not an effective behavioral strategy. Please don't use shame on your kids, because those are the things that they end up needing a life coach or a therapist or a counselor later on in life, and I'm being completely serious right now, to try to let go of, right? So shame is not an empowering tool for manipulating behavior. It's an effective one, but it's not an empowering one. So we think about this phrase, shame on you, and then we turn it to ourselves. Shame on me for that. And it's like there's this gigantic blanket of shame that we can't even free ourselves from in order to see our lives clearly enough to make better choices, right? We're holding ourselves in contempt for the choices that we made back then that were wrong, in air quotes, wrong. That's our judgment of them now. And the shame is the blanket that we don't even allow ourselves to get out from under in order to make better decisions. So when you are trapped inside the shame blanket, for almost everybody, there are only two options. One option is to continue making shame-filled decisions that will lead to shame-filled judgment because you're under the shame blanket. How can you make different decisions if you're in the experience of shame? The second option is you make no decision because you don't want to keep making the shameful decisions. Shameful, full of shame. The decisions are made from a place of shame because we are full of shame. So we can't make anything other than shameful decisions when we are full of shame. So we have to get out of that experience of shame in order to make better decisions. But I mean, think about it. We're essentially telling ourselves, I'm not going to lift this shame blanket off of you until you start making better decisions. But you can't make better decisions under the shame blanket. So it's just this perpetual catch-22, and it causes most people to essentially live their lives connected to all the shame of the past. And it's just an awful, toxic, poisonous energy for us to live in. Nobody will ever experience happiness through shame. Nobody will ever experience joy through shame. Nobody will ever experience any level of success that we want as humans. Nobody will ever experience it through shame. I said earlier, shame is effective. You can use shame to manipulate your own behavior. You just can't do it to produce happiness. So you can shame yourself into getting tasks done. You can shame yourself into or out of relationships. You can shame yourself into the gym and exercise. You can shame yourself into changing your behavior, but you will never produce happiness through shame. It's just impossible. That's not what happiness is built upon. You might satisfy your ego through shame, but you'll never make your heart happy through shame. So in order to release the shame, we have to let go of the guilt. So here's the concept. We make decisions in our lives. Nobody ever wants to make a wrong decision. Nobody ever. Nobody has ever made a knowingly wrong decision in the moment that they made it. Nobody. Every single decision every human being always makes is based on a need that human is trying to get fulfilled. Now, it might be a very low percentage that need is going to get fulfilled, but in the moment that we make a decision, there's a need that we are trying to get fulfilled. We are trying to meet through the decision. Even if we only have 1% hope that this decision will produce the need that we're trying to get met, we still have 1% hope. Nobody has ever made a knowingly wrong decision. Even with suicide, that's one of the things that some people say, well, what about people that kill themselves? That's knowingly wrong. No. To the suicidal brain, that's not knowingly wrong. That's the best option that they have in that moment because everything else that they've tried to produce happiness in their life hasn't worked. So the suicidal brain does not want to die. It wants the pain to stop. And in that moment, it thinks that this is now the best option for the pain to stop. So, I didn't want to turn this into a big morbid conversation, but I do want to address the outliers or the extreme examples. So every decision we ever make is based on a desired need, hopefully being met. Then what we do is we follow the path based on the decision, and then sometime later, we get new information. It doesn't work out the way we wanted it to work out. The relationship doesn't work out. He ends up being abusive again, or she ends up being a liar again, or the business ends up failing again. Whatever it is, usually the operating word there is again. Usually it's a repeat pattern, and then we use this again energy to turn around and deem from the future, relative to when the decision is made, we turn around and say that decision that I made back there was wrong with information that I now have. I don't know what could possibly be less fair. I don't know. What could possibly be less fair than this scenario? I want you to make a clean decision that's going to change my life out there in the future, but it better not be wrong. And I won't tell you whether it's wrong or not until out there in the future. How could that be any less fair? And here's the interesting piece. This just hit me the other day. Almost every decision, no, I'm going to use a universal here. Every decision that works out the way you hoped it would work out doesn't produce growth because it fulfilled your awareness from the time you made the decision. So essentially you said, this is how I expect it to work from my current awareness. If it works exactly like that, did your current awareness grow? No. Because the decision, all it did was essentially walk along the path that you laid out with the awareness that you had at the time you made the decision. So where I'm going with this is the decisions that don't turn out the way we want are actually the best ones. Actually the best ones. Because they lead to an opportunity to learn something that can grow our capacity. So listen to this connection here. The best decisions for us are the ones we deem wrong. The best decisions, the right decisions that work out the way we hoped they would with our expectation, are the ones that cannot produce growth. They can only keep us inside the lane that we had laid out for it. So what if we just simply understood the process of making choices with the current information that we have, and then give ourselves permission to make a new decision when new information arises? That's the key. When you get new information, you can make a new decision. So you can make a decision right now with all the information you have, and it's the right one. Why? Because it's the one you made. And you need to trust that this human brain is designed to keep you safe. That's why we get held back. The problems that so many of us are experiencing is because of the human brain's desire to keep us safe. Yet in this case, we don't allow it to do its job without judgment. We need to trust that our human brain will make every single choice based on safety, at least with that consideration. Might not be the whole ingredient, the whole recipe, but a major ingredient is safety all the time. This will never, ever put us in danger according to the way it operates. So we need to trust ourselves that we're going to take all the information we have, we're going to search for a desired need. So we're going to make the decision based on a need being met, hopefully, and then we're going to take action. And if 10 days later you get new information around the corner that you couldn't see from the time you made the choice, well then make a new decision. That's it. It doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. You just make a new decision. It's the internalization of stupid that stops most of us from making bold decisions in our life. So just make a new decision. If it's 10 days from now, great. If it's 10 years from now, great. If it's 10 seconds after you made the decision, great. It doesn't matter how long. New information means all decisions from the past are absolved from judgment. If I have new information, we see this in court all the time. I could get convicted of a crime based on the information that the court and the jury saw. Later on, there might be new information. We might know that there was corruption. We might realize there was a witness that lied, or a witness that nobody heard from, or that we might see DNA evidence, and we get a new trial. If there's new information, the old judgment is rendered useless. We're absolved from that judgment because there's new information. We need to apply that same thing to other people as well. This is how we let go of our resentment. Now, resentment, in my experience at least, isn't as heavy as shame because it's not applied to ourselves and it's not such a self-punishment. But it is heavy, and it causes us to be fearful, or causes us to just be angry, causes us to carry around a lot of triggers. Every decision that everybody else makes is also the best they can at the time with all the awareness that they have. And sometimes the new information that they don't have is information that you have. So it might not be future information, it's information that you have, but they don't have it. And we need to stop expecting other people to have the same information we have. So if we start judging other people by their intentions and not just by their actions, it'll help us remove the resentment. And similar to what I said about shame, so many people just live inside of the essence of resentment, so they just see it everywhere. And if you're determined to find people and things to resent, you'll find them. There's 8 billion of us. You'll find them. There's plenty of opportunity to find what you're looking for. And then we can apply the same thing to us. What if we judged our intention rather than our action? What happens is we get into a place of compassion and understanding rather than judgment, especially unfair judgment. And then the shame, here's the cool thing. The shame goes away because the shame is essentially the punishment for the crime. If I didn't commit a crime, then there's no punishment. So if we just try to deal with our shame, but we haven't overturned our conviction of the crime, that's just letting a criminal go. And none of us want to let a criminal go. So we think there has to be punishment for a crime. So instead of us trying to dissolve the shame, which is the punishment for the crime that hasn't been overturned, we're always going to struggle with that. But if we look at guilt, the wrong decision is the crime. If we remove ourselves from having created a crime, then the punishment goes away pretty much on its own. Now, we might still have some lingering effects of shame. We might have patterns of shame that we need to look at, but the shame blanket itself essentially dissolves, because none of us want to live in shame. None of us want, even though we might be familiar with it, none of us want it. But we haven't unhooked it by dealing with the guilt. So that's the actual operating variable here. I want you to look back on your life at a decision that you've been holding yourself in contempt over for a long, long time. A decision that you've been guilting yourself around and shaming yourself around. Because as long as you're in this place of guilt and shame, every decision going forward is going to be harder. And so many of us have this decision paralysis, but it's based on the guilt and the shame. In another video, I talked a little bit about going forward and having a better strategy for creating the decisions. But if we don't unhook from this emotional piece of guilt and shame, even if you have the right strategy, it's going to be really difficult. So this is the emotional anchor that we're removing here. So I want you to think about a decision that you made in the past, the one that's been holding on to you for the longest. For some people, that's years. For some people, it's a couple decades, maybe even more than that. What's the decision that you're still punishing yourself over that you know you need to let go of if you're going to grow forward? That decision was made in a moment where you had information and information that you didn't have, right? So I want you to ask, what information did you have? What information did you not have? And what need were you trying to get met? What need were you trying to get met? And then I'm going to add something. The fourth thing that I'm going to add on to this is, what lessons did you learn because of that decision that once upon a time was wrong, but it's a forward-moving decision, right? So if we remove the idea of right and wrong, we can just assess, are we going forward or are we going backwards? And most of the quote-unquote wrong decisions are ones that actually move us forward as long as we learn the lessons. So what lesson did you need to learn that will be important for where you want to go? Important to fulfill your purpose, important to be available for the kind of relationship that you want. So what information did you have? What information did you not have? What need were you trying to meet? And what lesson did you need to learn in order to fulfill something or be available for something in the future? We need support. That's a fundamental ingredient that so many people don't give themselves. We need support. We need an external perspective, because most of us are trying to use the entity to free ourselves that is trapping ourselves. We're using the same entity that has created the problems to solve the problems. It's like every time we get close, the protection changes the password. That's what happens. And then we just chase our tails for a long, long time. So get support, however that looks, and we'll help however we can. If there are things that are going on in your head, things that I said that don't make sense, things that I said that trigger other stuff, get help. Get help. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness. Seeking help is a sign of wisdom. Don't waste a bunch of time and a bunch of energy trying to solve problems that are literally impossible for the problem to solve. You're not the problem. It's the entity that is trying to keep you safe at all costs. That's the problem. So let us see into your blind spots and help you liberate whatever needs to be liberated so that you can live the life that you want to live.
Now, if you like this video, check out that video. We're going to break down the top 15 reasons that most coaches fail, and obviously the solutions to each one of them. What is the problem? You know, what are the ingredients that people are lacking, or what are the mistakes people are making?